Hi, my name is Stephen Turner, and I am the president of Gesher Galicia. Today, we are speaking with Jacek Stawiski, the new director of the Galicia Jewish Museum. The Galicia Jewish Museum exists to commemorate the victims of the Holocaust and celebrate the Jewish culture of Galicia, presenting Jewish history from a new perspective. An innovative and unique institution, it is located in Kazimierz, the Jewish district of Krakow. As a matter of fact, on our members portal, if you are a member of Gesher Galicia, we have a virtual tour of the museum that we would invite all of you to look at that was given by the previous director. The new director, Jacek, studied history as well as Jewish history and culture at the Jagiellonian University in Krakow. Since 1992, he worked as journalist, commentator, and media manager at the BBC World Service and RMF, the biggest Polish private radio channel, where he was head of news and current affairs. Hi, Jacek, and welcome to Gesher Galicia Today, our podcast series.
Hi, nice to hear from you. Welcome and warm greetings from very hot end of May time, Kraków.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. So give us a little background how the Galicia Jewish Museum came into being.
It was founded exactly 2 decades ago, so we celebrate our anniversary. It was founded in 2004 after several years of work by Chris Schwartz and his companion, Professor Jonathan Weber. Chris Schwartz was an English photographer who traveled as freelancer to various parts of the world. He actually was for the first time in Poland in 1981, which was a period of a revolution, social and political revolution of the Solidarity movement. So he came here, and we are to celebrate the anniversary of the founding. We will present in a month new exhibition, his photographs from Poland at that time of Solidarity, 81. And later on, he came back to Poland at the end of the Free Poland period in 90s. And about a decade, he traveled around the former Galicia, which was part of the Austrian Empire, southern Poland occupied by the Empire of Austria, part of that Galicia, including the famous town of Lvov, Lemberg, Lviv in Ukrainian, has been for decades in the Soviet Union, and now it is in the independent Ukraine. So Galicia is a non-existing territorial entity, but because Galicia was more than 100 years Austrian occupied, and because it was also for about 5 decades part of very liberal Austrian Empire that was very tolerant and open to various nationalities, religions, Poles dominated the political landscape, but Galicia was very important for coexistence of Poles, Ukrainians, Jews, Armenians, and other nations. And the Galician heritage plays significant role in the history of the diaspora of Jews in Europe. It's sometimes romanticized, I would say. Poles also romanticize about Galicia that it was a good period, and because Poland was occupied by 3 neighboring powers, Russia, Germany, Prussia, and Austria, the life under Russian rule was very, very hard for political and social reasons. When it comes to Germany, the Polish language was removed from offices and from cultural scene. It's complicated. I don't want to elaborate a lot about it. But in Galicia, the Austrians allowed Poles to maintain cultural autonomy and educational autonomy, and Galicia was also important for Polish culture. So this universum of Galicia was unique in making the modern part of Jewish and Polish Jewish heritage as well.
Well, I could tell you that when you speak about romanticizing, that the American Galicianas and the worldwide Jewry Galicianas in general speak with romantic feelings towards Galicia as well. Because what we heard from our parents and grandparents, although they had a very difficult life, we heard a lot about that too, but we also heard about the great charms and great pleasures in their lives, and the great culture and the heritage. And we at Galicia consider that a big part of our mission to promote that heritage and culture.
Yeah, I perfectly agree that people do think that it was a so-called utopian landscape. I would dispute that because there's no utopia in the world. I don't want to discourage you from romanticizing, but of course, one needs to remember that Galicia was the poorest part of the Austrian Empire.
And there's a reason why so many of our ancestors left,
including to North America.
Right.
And not only Jews, but also Poles. But Galicia is being portrayed as a romantic utopian landscape because in comparison, for instance, to neighboring Imperial Russia, which was officially anti-Jewish, it organized, inspired pogroms against Jews. It actually never fully developed into a modern political constitutional monarchy, contrary to Austria and to Imperial Germany, which was an advanced political project, very attractive also for Jewish culture. The Jewish diaspora spoke in Central Europe Yiddish, which is a language related to German language. So there was this kind of attractiveness of Austria and Galicia to Jewish culture, and but to be precise, many Galician Jews, when Polish culture developed so rapidly and very famously, and universities, galleries, and so on, and literature, so the Jews accepted either German language Austrian culture or Polish language culture, or stayed within the Orthodoxy framework. So yes, Galicia is a universe of different identities, memories, different layers for various ethnicities. Poles were also divided just briefly because the Poles had autonomy, but it was given mainly to this aristocratic and gentry-oriented, these ruling classes, to say that in post-Marxist terms, and the new classes rebelled against that rule of the aristocrat and so on. So I wouldn't romanticize, but I agree in comparison to countries like Imperial Russia or Romania, for instance, which was also very anti-Jewish, but it's one of the most important parts of the development of Jewish diaspora in Central Europe. Galicia was peaceful and fantastic place, and it was close to every center of European life that was important because it was close to Vienna, to Budapest, to Berlin, to Lvov, to Kraków, and so on. That's how to describe it, I think, honestly, not to over-romanticize, but not to downplay the romantical myth of Galicia.
Now, describe your family life growing up. Where did you grow up?
I am almost a Galicianer. My parents come from the former Galicia, but in in Poland, I would say that I was, no, to be precise, I was born in a hospital that is outside of Galicia, a few kilometers away from the historical border. But I grew in Galicia. I grew in a village nearby the town of Kraków. I consider myself to be a Krakowian. Of course, I traveled a lot and I worked outside Kraków also for a long time in England and in Warsaw. And I have encountered Jewish culture as a teenager by accident. I have no Jewish background, no Jewish relatives, only vaguely. My father told me that his father was a Wemko, that is another, not a nation, but an ethnic group from former Galicia, close to Ukrainian identity, but some of the Wemkos dispute that. My grandfather, I never met him because he died well before my parents met. So I'm a Polish guy. My native language is Polish. I was raised as a Roman Catholic, but I encountered the Jewish culture very early in my life. And I grew with this growing interest.
And how did you encounter the Jewish culture? What was your first introduction to it?
Yeah, it was very stereotypic. I met people who came to first ever official March of the Living organized in Poland at the end of 1980s. And I just spoke to them. I met them asking for directions because I met them in the middle of the night in Kraków. I was late to home. I couldn't phone. And I just said, I stood in front of a shop with rock records. This is where I always looked what kind of records from Poland or Europe are there in the vitrine in the window. And I asked them, what is the time? Because I will miss my last tram. And they said, we don't speak Polish. So I answered them because I was in need of what's the time? And they answered in English. And then we began a chat. And I spent with them many days because they were Israelis and Americans. And when they left, I said, that's very interesting because a lot has been said about Jewish presence in Poland, and a lot has not been said because of different reasons. I can explain that, and but I will pursue that. And I entered the university several months after that, and I asked the late Professor Józef Gierowski, who founded the Judaic studies at the Jagiellonian University. As a young man, I asked him, Professor, I would like to ask you to give me permission to study individual courses because I know you are organizing Jewish studies, but not this year, not the second year. But can you help me? I will study history and history of Jews. And he said, yes, of course. And he took a type machine and typed a letter to the rector of the university or deputy rector. I don't remember it. I have this letter somewhere among my books. And he said, study under my supervision, you will have different program. At that time, the Polish university system was very rigid. You had to go through a certain fixed programs and with no deviations. And unless you had been given permission by the Senate or the rector to pursue some kind of new individual program. So I pursued individual program. I very much appreciate that and cherish that because I have not been forced to attend courses that I would forget 5 days after, but I read a lot of books. I had met a lot of people. It was also end of 80s and beginning of 90s when Poland began to open. And also the Jewish diaspora and Poland and the state of Israel, Poland, they met again, and people were coming to Poland, and many Jewish personalities and private people, they were just coming because Poland was open. And as I said at the beginning, I was growing with this growing interest in Jewish past in Poland and outside Poland. Poland became important for many Jews again. They were coming because it was easy. It wasn't a communist country anymore. I must also admit that at the end of the 80s, still under communist rules, the authorities have eased a lot of restrictions. So American Jews, academics, private persons, publishers, people from Israel were coming, or Poles were invited to go for lectures and so on. So that interest was, I was parallel to this phenomenon. And also Kraków is a place where the liberal, strongly anti-communist, but also very democratic, tolerant, and open liberal Catholic intelligentsia, opposition circles under communism flourished. In covenants, sometimes in the corridors of covenants, we had seminars about history, about politics, and the authorities did not always intervene. So there was also a very much interest in the Catholic circles about the Judaic heritage, and I was feeling that they were publishing activities and periodicals issued under the supervision of the church, but they were about the links between Christians and Jews and so on. I hope one day to write probably an article or a story, because in itself this re-interest of this reopening of our two communities on various levels is also a history in itself. It did not happen out of blue.
Now you're communicative, you say, in Hebrew and Yiddish. Now, is that from studying in school, or is that from like your travels?
I must admit that my Hebrew, I'm losing my Hebrew because it's a very difficult language, and for some months that I've been here as director, I didn't use it. So I'm afraid I will again have to restart conversations to be fluent. Yiddish I have learned at the university, and Hebrew I learned at the university. In my research, in my interests, I have also, I must admit that I'm mostly reading sources, historical sources, press articles about Jewish culture, or Jewish sources that are mainly in Polish, German, or Russian.
So you went from being the media manager for the BBC in Poland to being a communications manager for the Plazov camp. What was that like, making that switch?
You asked me about my media background?
Well, you were at the BBC and at the radio station, and then you became the communications director for the Plazov camp.
Ah, right? Yes. Okay. Well, the story is as this. I wanted to enter the academic studies about Jewish culture, but it did not materialize. Poland was at that time in very fluid times. Rigid socialism was being replaced by new, sometimes unpredictable capitalism. So I didn't have possibilities, any offer of job at the university, although I tried. And my professor kept an open mind about accepting me when he has funds. But meanwhile, I applied for job at the BBC World Service in England, and they accepted me. So I went straight away there, where I have also met in London a lot of people from Jewish background and also Galicianes as well. Some of them are unfortunately have already passed away, but I met people from Kraków or Lemberg, Lviv, in London. I spoke to them, so I pursued my interest there, and I'm very happy that I could have gone to London for 5 years to meet people who, of course, were coming to Krakow regularly at that time because they wanted to come to their homeland in a way. But they have been living in London since the 30s. And I have spoken to them often, and I met them at different lectures, and yeah, it was very interesting experience. I would mention two people I have met and regularly. One was Janina Fischler Marinho. She was a Krakow Jewish teenager during the Holocaust, and she and her brother escaped the Krakow ghetto. She wrote a memoir, Have You Seen My Little Sister? She lived in South London, and she, at the end of the war, she met her brother again in 1945, 1946 in Krakow, and then they emigrated to the UK, where she married later on, and she spoke such wonderful Polish of an educated woman from Krakow. I met her once. We actually had a kind of dispute, Polish-Jewish dispute about the various things, but she was very open, and she later on came to Krakow. And the other person was a monumental figure, Felek Raphael Scharf, who has been a writer, publisher, commentator since the 30s. He went to England in 1937 or 8 or 6. I don't want to make a mistake now. He was an ardent Zionist, very, very convinced Zionist. He wanted somehow to smuggle himself into the mandatory Palestine to fight for the homeland of Jews. As far as he said, as far as I remember, he talks to him and his books, he did not go to Palestine. He was in England when the Second World War started. He joined the UK Army. Then he stayed in the Isles. He married, but he was always a Krakow Jew. And he immediately after the collapse of communism, he began to come back. He had an office here, and he was so active in telling us the story of Kraków and Galicia, because he was a true Galician.
Now,
From
and
also
what about your work then in the Plazov camp?
about the Plaszów, and after 3 decades of working in media very intensively, when the pandemic came, I decided to step away. I said, okay, that's enough. Maybe it's time to re-enter the field of Jewish work, Jewish interest, not to abandon completely the media, but I was just also trying to escape from Warsaw, where I stayed 15 years in the capital of Poland. It's a completely different universe. And I wanted to come back to Kraków, and the pandemic was an inspiration for that, I would say. And I found several places. I asked several people, and they said, we need someone who can build the communication department of the new museum at the former German Nazi camp Plaszów in Kraków. We are starting. We can accept you immediately if you want to join us. So I joined the museum. I have many friends there.
Now, was before or after Schindler's List came out?
Oh, no, that was 2.5 years ago. That was 2.5
Oh, it was 2.5 years ago.
Yeah. And in June last year, exactly a year ago, I read that there is a position at the Galicia Jewish Museum, and so that's how I found myself in the Galicia Jewish Museum.
Okay, now you had your master's thesis was on Zionism in Galicia.
Yes.
Now, we could do a whole podcast just on that subject. But if
Yes.
you can just give us one takeaway that you would want our listeners to know about Zionism in Galicia, what would that be?
Well, if I understood you correctly, you want me to summarize it, yes?
No, not to summarize, but like what you would say would be like the most important aspect about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I would risk a hypothesis that without the experience of the Jews of Galicia, Theodor Herzl would not have created the political movement. He has come and he has taken what already has been flourishing and there was a pulse of Zionism within Galicia, also within the Russian Empire, but it was different because it was semi-legal. Whereas in Galicia it was legal, it was a liberal constitutional monarchy, and Galicia was a Polish-dominated province of Galicia, which was also very liberal in terms of political activities. So the Jews of Galicia and of Austria, they came together, those who had dreams of Jewish homeland, and they organized clubs, political movements all over the province in the 80s. And several years after, there was a guy called Theodor Herzl, and he had taken these experiences. So without Galician Jewish experience and Zionist experience, I don't think the Zionists would have flourished so quickly.
I agree with you.
Later.
I agree with you.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it was a hope for the Jews on many levels in Galicia. It was a hope to get away from, although the Galician Jews, like you said, were not as oppressed as the Jews that lived in the Palace settlement. They still did not feel like they could live their full life as Jews, and therefore they formed the basis for what became the political Zionism movement. I very much agree with that, and I think that's an underlooked at aspect when people look at the history of Zionism.
I perfectly agree. I think that this is what I'm interested in. This is the pre-Herzlian period, because it's interesting how the early Zionists, they weren't very much, ideologically organized. They weren't. Later on, there were Zionists who were left-wing, very left-wing, religious, right-wing, then very right-wing, and so on. But at that time, it was a kind of national awakening. And people did feel that there is something to gain from. What is important for me also to point that is that the first Zionists did not speak Hebrew. They propagated others to learn Hebrew.
Right.
They couldn't speak. It was an ancient religious language. They very often were secular. They were fluent. They were students at universities in Lvov or in Kraków or in Vienna or in Berlin. So their languages were German and Polish. These were also the founding languages, and Russian as well, of Zionist movement. Someone has to understand that, again, without this background these were educated, young, romanticized people who said, yes, we are Jews, we are Hebrews, we need to re-establish our link to the ancient language, although we don't speak it. We will write brochures and books and pamphlets and articles in German or Polish. That is also very important, I think, to remember. And one thing that can be seen very differently today, it's mostly about the state of Israel. It's not America. It's not the American experience, but the Zionists did despise Yiddish language.
Oh
They
yeah.
said they,
Oh yeah.
yeah. So I think that they, in this case, they made a disservice to the Jewish
I fully
heritage.
agree that there were, on that note, there were many Yiddish actors that
Yes,
when Israel came into being, they were Yiddish actors in America, North America. And they said, well, this is the place where all the Jews are going to be. We're going to go to Israel and reestablish Yiddish theater and papers there. And they left because the government, Ben Gurion especially, was very anti-Yiddish. And
yes, yes.
he wanted people to learn Hebrew. He didn't want them to have to rely on their old language. I mean, there's an understanding of why that could be, that why he wanted that, but yet it's a subjugation of a big part of Jewish culture
Yeah.
that was, I think, a disservice. Okay, let's move on now. Your PhD thesis that you're working on now is on the politics, history, and national memory in Poland from 1989 to 1995. Now, no one can accuse you of picking a non-controversial topic. How is it navigating your work through this minefield?
Uh, I am writing it because I want to demine it.
I wish you
Um,
luck in that.
I mean, it's very popular that the so-called identity politics, memory politics, the national heritage plays significant role in many countries, and it plays very much into the today's politics. It is in case of America, it is a case of the state of Israel, it is a case of Poland, France. The United Kingdom has left the European Union a few years ago because partly of this awakening of national thinking. I am pointing to another experience of Polish history. Poland has a very rich history. It's 1,000 years old kingdom and republic, and occupied and invaded, and sometimes the quarrels between Jews and Poles, I would summarize in one sentence: two nations maimed by history sometimes cannot agree who was maimed more, or so on. It's Polish people are very much, very sensitive to our sufferings and so on. And of course, the Jewish people, for reasonable reasons, are also very sensitive to their tragic past and so on. So, with a country with such a huge historical burden has entered into communist occupied mode after 1945, and Soviet dominated system that also tried to overturn the historical narrative. Polish people have, as I say, rich history, literature, architecture, and so on. And the communists tried to erase a lot of that. So not only mine, it's not, I'm not trying to, invent a wheel, but one of the driving force of the opposition against communism, underground, church-related opposition, and so on, was to rewrite this communist historical narrative into a Polish national historical narrative. And I'm trying to portray how the Solidarity authorities, when they came to power peacefully in '89, how they were making decisions to restore the old political narrative and historical narrative, and also because historic is always fluid. Suddenly the Free Poland found itself within a completely new environment of neighbors and new environment of Jewish diaspora that Free Poland had to find ways of speaking directly to the Russians, without communists, directly to the Ukrainians, directly to Belarusians, directly to Lithuanians, directly to Czechs, to Slovaks, to Germans who united, and then directly to the state of Israel and to the Jewish diaspora, the free Poles, not the communist authorities as it used to be for 45 years. And this endeavor of trying to recreate this narrative of historical heritage of Poland, very rich and very proud very often, and this new ways of dealing with historical narratives with neighbors and with the Jewish people in new environment. We had a lot of conflict and blood among us and Germans and Ukrainians, and then all these free countries suddenly in the 90s became free and wanted to share destiny, and then
Okay.
and then the authorities, the new authorities, had to balance this old, for instance, anti-German feeling among Poles, for reasonable reasons, but balance it with the new challenges. We are free in a Europe that is being united, and Germany and Poland and other nations have to find ways of living together.
Well,
And
this
it
is
also
really fascinating work that you're doing, and we wish you the best of luck. When do you anticipate achieving the PhD?
I don't want to claim to Providence, because Providence has a lot of things to do in the world, but I hope Providence will help me to do it by the end of 24.
Amen. Okay, now let's go back to the museum now. Describe some of the recent activity at the museum.
Mm-hmm. We have been I have inherited a solid, functioning, flourishing institution with lots of activities and lots of connections and lots of links with Kraków, with neighboring towns, with Warsaw, with Europe, and with North America and the State of Israel. And our recent activities is re-establishing educational seminars on Holocaust and Jewish heritage that were suspended during the pandemic. So we are fully in gear now. We are working with teachers and public officials from all over Poland. We are teaching them Holocaust history. We are teaching them Jewish heritage. We are in full gear after pandemic of accepting visitors to our exhibitions, to our temporary and permanent exhibitions, and in full gear organizing social events like meetings with authors of books on Jewish and not only Jewish history and culture. Recently, we had recently, in the past year, we had 3 major temporary exhibitions, very interesting. One was Krokę, the Orthodox Jews of Kraków today, photographs by Agnieszka Traczewska, very interesting exhibition. You can find her album of photographs in the internet. You can buy it. It's bilingual, English and Polish. Krokę is the Yiddish name of Kraków. The other exhibition we have just finished was exhibition called Cold Eye. It was a very difficult, but very important exhibition about the Holocaust in Tarnów, a smaller town east of Kraków. Very important part of Galician Jewish heritage. Tarnów had about 60,000 people, inhabitants, or 70, and half of them were Jews. And the Nazis decided to make an experiment, a pseudo-scientific experiment in Tarnów. They anthropologists from then Nazi-dominated Austria went to Kraków to portray families of Jews as alien race, and it was a kind of scientific or pseudo-scientific foundation for the extermination of the Jewish nation. And several hundred of these photographs have been left in Vienna. They were rediscovered in 80s, I think, and they were there is an exhibition of these pictures of the Jews of Tarnów. A very interesting, very important, and very moving, sad exhibition about the extermination of the Jews of Tarnów. And we also have a new exhibition, Her Stories. It's in partnership with various European NGOs and Jewish institutions. It's funded by the EU. It's about female Jewish voices about Holocaust and life after Holocaust. 8 women from various European Jewish women who survived the Holocaust, and each of them tell her story about the Shoah and about the life after. In Germany or in Poland or in Serbia, in communist and non-communist countries after the war. And in very soon we will have two new exhibitions. One will be, I have mentioned it already, the exhibition in the memory of our founder, Chris Schwartz, his first photographs of Poland, how his love and journey to Poland began. In the 80s, he witnessed the Solidarity Revolution. In the 90s, he went for a decade throughout towns in southern Poland, picturing, photographing the Jewish monuments, houses, and signs, cemeteries, former synagogues, ruins, as well as restored buildings, and so on. And another exhibition we'll have about a Jewish girl from Przemyśl, another important town in the Jewish Galician Polish landscape. Today it's at the border between Poland and Ukraine. Renia Spiegel, we have, thanks to a US State Department funding, we have made a series of social media films about Renia Spiegel, a teenager writing in Polish a diary from the Przemyśl ghetto. Renia Spiegel's diary, you can watch it on the YouTube of Galicia Jewish Museum, and we'll make an exhibition about her that we want later on to export to other towns in Poland, maybe in America.
Now, as we all know, a good portion of Galicia is now in Ukraine, and
Yes.
your museum is in Poland. So, would you say that there is much more emphasis on the Polish portion of Galicia, or would you say it's about equal?
Definitely, we focus on the Polish landscape, Polish territory, former Galicia, but we have a supplement to our permanent exhibition, Traces of Memory, that Chris has collected the photographs. He traveled in the 90s only in the territory of Poland. But in the 2016, 2017, an American photographer has made a travel to Ukraine, and he portrayed the Jewish heritage. In very bad shape it is, but he portrayed the synagogues, cemeteries in we call it Eastern Galicia, which is the part today is in Ukraine, in the regions of Lemberg, Lvov, and Tarnopol, and Ivano-Frankivsk, and so on. So there is a supplementary exhibition in a small room, today's heritage of Jews of Galicia in the eastern part of it. This is very difficult to explain to visitors from abroad, that Galicia, non-existing territorial entity that we sacrifice our activities to, is not only non-existent, but is also divided into different countries. I also would like to say, I think it's important to remember that Galicia we are talking about is the romanticized the period of Austria, but Galicia has been part also of independent Poland for 20 years before the Second World War. It was then occupied partly by Nazi Germany and Soviet Russia. Then later on, it was occupied solely by Nazi Germany, and the destruction of Galician Jews was almost complete in the ghettos and in the death camp Belzec. And later on, again, it was divided. Part of it stayed in the communist Poland, but which was much more free and open. Comparison to Soviet Union, it wasn't to compare at all. And part of it stayed in the Soviet Union. So it's and then in the 90s, it again the territory evolved because it was part of a free Poland and a part of free first time ever state of Ukraine. So there is a kind, the borders have changed, and also its post-Austrian, post-Galician life is also very important because it touches the heritage of Jews in a very important ways. A part of the Jewish people of the eastern part of Galicia escaped the part to deeper into the Soviet Union, or were deported by Stalinist authorities to Siberia. So those who survived the Siberian conditions, those who did not escape somewhere else, for instance, with the Polish army, after the Soviets defeated the Nazis, they came back to Eastern Galicia. So the Soviet Jewish dimension, which was very important even in global politics between Washington and Moscow, it talks about Jewish emigration, is also a part of Galician heritage. It's not only Jews of Leningrad and Moscow. No, it was also Jews who came back to the former Galicia. Not
Yes.
many people, but this history never fully ends. History always has overlaps with new conditions, and it touches the Jewish experience as well.
Right. Now, any major future plans of besides what you've already spoke about? What do you see as the future of the Galicia Jewish Museum?
Well, we would like to expand our educational exhibition activities. We would like to have more possibilities to present our collections. We would like to expand our cooperation with other institutions to export our simplified versions of our exhibitions. We also would like to ask for funding for anyone who wishes to support our mission, our purpose. We kindly welcome you to donate to us, and our task is to preserve the solid foundation of the museum. And also, for instance, I have mentioned the Traces of Memory exhibition. We are going to renovate this exhibition to put new dimension into it. The Galician Jewish heritage portrayed by Chris 3 decades ago, it also evolves. Synagogues are being restored, cemeteries are being taken care of by Polish people, by local communities, by Jewish communities, by Polish, Jewish, Israeli endeavor, by European funds, and so it's this is a moving agenda, and we would like to be a place not only to welcome the viewers to see the past, but we also want this huge memory of flourishing and tragic periods to reinterpret our heritage, our common and Jewish and Polish and European heritage, and Ukrainian. We know that Ukraine is in the state of war. We hope peace would come, a just peace, and new possibilities might emerge into rediscovering our common a free nation heritage, Polish, Ukrainian, Jewish. We have Jewish Ukrainian refugees who have been working with us, and I hope there is a platform. You know, you asked about the eastern dimension of Galicia. There's a platform to work on. Of course, we need peace. And this is something above
That's
our
for sure.
heads. But yeah, we are hoping to stay as strong as we are and expand our purpose.
Well, we at Galicia, Gesher Galicia, consider ourselves a strong and important partnership with the Galicia Jewish Museum, and we want to see that partnership flourish in the coming years.
Thank
Now,
you.
I personally have been in Krakow in 2001, and then before the IAJGS in Warsaw in 2016. And just the difference in the Krakow Jewish community between 2001 and 2016 was amazing to my eyes. When I was there in 2001, there was one functioning synagogue, and I went to the Shabbat services, and there were very few people there. When I was there in 2016, there were at least two functioning synagogues. One synagogue was hosting a bar mitzvah where you couldn't even, the Isaac synagogue, you couldn't even get into it. It was so crowded. The Jewish presence in Krakow is really flourishing. I would advise all those listening, thinking about it, to take a trip to Krakow and experience it themselves. And of course, while you're in Krakow, you must visit the Galicia Jewish Museum.
Yes, and I also very much encourage you to look at the map of the former Galicia and look into the whole landscape of this archipelago of former shtetls of the Jewish towns. Not only Kraków, it's well beyond us. So we want to be the launching pad of your trips to Galicia, from Kraków to other places, because the heritage is, you know, evenly, I would say, partitioned. This is what I said about Tarnów. It's of course, in mathematic terms, one could say that in pre-war Poland, there was a Jewish minority of 3 million people out of 35. So about 3-point-something million Jews. This was a minority. Yes, that's true. In encyclopedia, you could write it. But in reality, when you look at every town, a big town like Lemberg, Lwów, or Kraków, or Łódź, or Warsaw, Jews were 40%, 25, 40, 33. When you went to smaller towns, little towns, the Jews were out of 60%. So it was not a minority, not a minority.
My father was born in Nadvorna, which is now Nadvina in Ukraine. It's south of Stanislav, or today's Ivano-Frankivsk. And in 2018, in the same trip, we crossed the border into Ukraine and visited those towns. And over half the town, over half the shtetl was Jewish. And now there's not any Jews there. But it's important to visit all those places, and God willing, peace will be there. So I want to thank you, Jacek, for spending the time with us. If anyone has any questions that they want to ask Jacek or ask us at Gesher Galicia, you should send an email to info@geshergalicia.org. And we appreciate that. And I want to remind everybody that if you want to take a virtual tour of the museum, it is available to members of Gesher Galicia on our members portal. Thank you. Good day.
Thank you. Thank you. Good day. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.